The internet has also created this really like distorted image that strong applicants always look a certain way. The most successful applicants that I've had in the decade I've been doing this are not like teenage superheroes. They're normal people, smart, but normal people who have developed real interests seriously over time. They have developed maturity. They've developed impact through the experiences that they've had. Just a bit of a pause. I'm Christina. I've spent more than a decade helping international students apply to the US and Canadian universities, as well as schools around the world. And a big part of my job I have found over that time is that helping students understand what these systems are actually looking for is a great way to make those systems feel approachable, to make the application process feel like you know what you're supposed to be doing. So today I want to step back a bit and explain how US college admissions actually works, especially for international students. Kind of a like, what is this process? Because really a lot of people don't have a full grasp of it, and that makes it all that much more scarier and that much more stressful. Okay, so one thing I have noticed over the years working with international students applying to US universities is that a lot of 10th and 11th graders and their parents still really don't understand the application system in America. Vietnamese kids coming from a university entrance exam system give way too much power to the SAT because the SAT is very similar to the high school entrance exam they take in Vietnam, but it's not an equivalent. UK kids, for instance, routinely underestimate the extracurricular activities, leadership roles especially, because the supercurriculars that you need for the UK admissions are really evaluated quite differently than extracurriculars in the US. They're trying to show different things. And the list goes on. The confusion that comes from this makes sense. We all come into these sorts of things, to the application process, with experiences and ideas, all based on the life experience we've had so far, which varies so much person to person. The key thing that we're doing here today is to think a little bit about what you're getting yourself into, for me to share some things about what you're getting yourself into, so that you can spend more time and energy on like the right stuff to do it appropriately. So the more you know about the system, the better you are at getting into it. Otherwise, the US process is going to feel super confusing. American admissions, especially if you're focusing on highly competitive institutions, is incredibly subjective, and that's on purpose. If it comes from, like if a student coming in from a standardized system like Vietnam or like the UK, it's going to seem really weird. It's going to seem unpredictable. So the first thing to know is that competitive US admissions is not just about grades. Schools are definitely not just taking all the applicants, organizing them by GPA, and admitting like the top 10% or the top 15%. If they did that, they would become academically strong, possibly, because they'd only have the super smart, super high achieving kids academically, but they would also be super one-dimensional. They are trying to build a class, a community. They want different interests, academic ones. They want different personalities. They want different strengths. They want people who are really passionate about leadership. They want people who are passionate about community service. They want people who want to study physics and philosophy. That's why two students with very similar grades might end up with very different outcomes for the same school. Doesn't mean it's random. It does mean that they are thinking about something a bit more broad and inclusive. Now, absolutely academics matter. Probably more than any other individual factor. Course rigor matters a lot as well. The context of your individual school. And depending on the university, testing may matter too. And honestly, more and more schools are starting to include the SAT again. But at selective schools, most applicants are already really academically capable. They have good grades. So admissions officers are trying to understand more than just, are you able to do well academically at this place? They're going to assume that's a yes. What kind of person are you? What do you care about? How do you spend your time? What kind of energy are you going to bring into the environment? How are you going to contribute to that community? Do you create things? Are you committed to things? Are you leading in a way that is going to build to that community? Are you pushing yourself intellectually? These are the pieces that feel unfamiliar to a lot of international students because they're really like opaque and not as easy to prove as I'm smart. And in many countries, Admissions is really intentionally standardized, and I think UCAS and Vietnam are both actually great examples of that. You receive a score or ranking, you apply based mostly on those numbers, but the US system is just like so much more subjective, and that is on purpose. It's not a flaw in the system, it's design. It's basically what people mean when they say holistic admissions, which I know I've already mentioned once here today. Universities are going to evaluate students across all kinds of dimensions rather than one single metric, because that's how you build a dynamic community full of lots of different kinds of people in every sense of the word. Now, don't stress out. I know what it's like, especially for those of you actively following admissions reels and TikToks. You hear people talking about extracurriculars and leadership and passion projects, which is all overwhelming. You see students with perfect grades who are getting rejected from schools that they thought of as safe. And then you see other students with projects and profiles that seem pretty normal who are all of a sudden admitted to a top 10 or top 20 school. It is a lot. Remember that the internet is not all real, but also remember that the process that feels random is just more complicated than the information you're being presented with. So with the US, instead of saying, okay, let's see, student A got a 1550 SAT and student B got a 1480 SAT, therefore A will definitely get admitted, schools are evaluating a much bigger picture. If we knew that student B was doing really cool stuff in their free time, or if the school that they went to had other exciting things that student B had created, that SAT is going to seem a lot less important. Academics are the foundation. Without strong academics, selective universities are not going to be very interested in you because they want to make sure that you're going to be able to do well in a very competitive environment. But they're also trying to understand your story and the context beyond the numbers. What opportunities does this student have access to? How did the student use those opportunities? What choices did they make about their activities, their energy, their time? A student who has access to expensive tutoring and summer programs and private research opportunities and research mentors, international competitions, extensive advising from a school with not that many students per counselor is not going to be looked at the same way as a student who is in a much larger high school with much less attention and with financial budgets limitations. And this is why extracurricular activities are so important, because it's the stuff that you choose to do with your free time. A lot of students sort of hear that activities are important and then they panic. They think, okay, I'm going to join every club. I'm going to start a nonprofit. I'm going to open a business. I'm going to intern at 3 different organizations this summer. Please don't do that. Please don't do that. Admissions officers are usually much more interested in depth, in consistency, in initiative, and in genuine engagement. Much more than like a random collection of stuff. They're looking for a pattern and for you to deepen yourself through the things that you participate in over the years of high school. What excites you? Where do you naturally want to invest your time and energy? How have you grown? Do we see that growth in your extracurriculars? You do not need to cure cancer at 16. You probably haven't saved a busload of children from careening off a cliff in a village in the countryside. If you've applied claiming that you've done advanced research with like real findings, you better have publications to match, and you better be able to explain how that work has happened for you, because it's quite unusual for a high school student to have done actual academic work at a publication level. Otherwise, you're going to be like a massive red flag. The internet has also created this really like distorted image that strong applicants always look a certain way. The most successful applicants that I've had in the decade I've been doing this are not like teenage superheroes. They're normal people, smart, but normal people who have developed real interests seriously over time. They have developed maturity. They've developed impact through the experiences that they've had. So let's briefly go over the major pieces of a typical US application. First of all, you've got academics. This includes your grades across multiple years. For the US, it's 9, 10, 11, 12. Most Vietnamese high schools is going to be 10, 11, 12. For the UK, it's probably the last 3 years of high school, and then, of course, the A-levels. Those predicted scores, depending on your educational system, are important, but they will also be looking at any other information on your transcript. Then there's activities, sport, clubs, research, creative projects, volunteering, work experience, family responsibilities. All of it matters because it's part of this story that you have to explain to them. Then there are essays, my favorite part. Essays are a much bigger part of the process, and many international students underestimate these or don't realize it until they get to the point where they have to write so many essays. Good essays are not about sounding impressive. They're not about flexing intellectualism. They are there to help universities understand who you are, what you think, what matters to you, and who you are beyond your transcript. It is a personal statement, not an academic one. Then there are recommendation letters. These give universities and the people who are judging whether you belong there an outsider's perspective of your character, your classroom presence, and what you're going to contribute to the community. It's a teacher saying, here's how he was for us. This is how he will probably be for you. And depending on the school, we might add to that creative portfolios, the SAT, interviews, all kinds of different things. Then we have the timeline. This is another thing that students underestimate if they're not from the US, because often it doesn't take as long to apply to a university in other countries. Applications are usually submitted in grade 12, which is year 13 in the UK and a few other systems. But the strongest applications are usually built gradually over years before that. So it's not something that you do the beginning of your final year of school. Now, students are more strategically working on things earlier. I'm not saying you should strategically start manufacturing a profile from age 14. Please, again, don't do this. But real interests, leadership, confidence, academic direction, meaningful activities, those take time to develop. You don't do that authentically in one summer before you apply. This is the reason that I really like students to start working on this process in grade 10, which is grade 11 in the UK. Even if they have absolutely no idea like where they want to apply yet, starting to figure out who you are and what you want is the way to begin. Okay, so don't panic earlier. Make smarter decisions, think about what you want, explore intentionally, and then ignore all the misinformation that comes out. Once you understand what the system is trying to evaluate, the advice online becomes much easier to filter. And this is one of the reasons that you should learn about it early so that all that stuff isn't where you're getting everything. You stop chasing random resume building activities. You start comparing yourself to the people who have information similar to yours rather than just to exaggerate it and sometimes fake profiles online. Start building high school experiences stronger, earlier, and more authentically. Anyways, if this kind of a breakdown, this sort of rambling conversation is helpful, I am planning to make some more videos highlighting specific parts of the application. So to talk for an entire session about interviews specifically, or what kind of resumes American schools might accept, or whether you should do a self-introduction video. Hopefully these are going to be ways for you to sort of think about one component piece and to put it into your plan. And then again, if some point you want personalized guidance through those applications, you can also reach out directly. I work with a small cohort of students each year, thoughtfully weekly meeting on planning out their high school years with all of this stuff in mind. All right, that's it for today. Enough rambling. I hope you have a great day.